Welcome to Spiritual Steps, a podcast about learning to pray, listen, and grow by taking small steps on the spiritual journey. I'm your host, Stephen Hovatter, and this is episode 8, Pursue Virtue. In this episode, I want to encourage you to make the pursuit and cultivation of virtue a pillar of your spiritual life. It's too easy to think about the spiritual life as like made up of components such as the practice of spiritual disciplines or the development of our inner life or maybe our feelings of spiritual intimacy with God. And there's another facet that's way too easily set aside, though, and it's the pursuit of virtue. For some reason, virtue seems to have fallen out of style. It's out of fashion. It doesn't seem like it's important as maybe it once was. But it was certainly something that was important to the Lord, important to the early church, and indeed has been important to much of the church throughout history. And it's critical for us. The investigation of virtue is something that the early church had in common with its neighbors, and it's not something different for us, right? There's always this negotiation with the people around us about what it actually means to be good and how a person becomes good, and what really defines goodness as a whole. In the early church, they were living in this world where the philosophers were thinking through all those questions, whether it be Aristotle and his school or Plato or the Stoics or whoever, and they all had different versions about what it really meant to be good. And sometimes the church agreed with those things, and sometimes they had something different to say and something counter to the message that was being offered in the culture. Maybe about what qualified as something good or what didn't, or maybe what the proportions of the various virtues their value, which virtues were more important, which ones are less so. But the church always agreed with its neighbors on certain ones of those, right? Like justice and wisdom and temperance and courage. Those four were something very important with the culture around them. And the church adopted those things. And, over time, those known as the cardinal virtues, they kind of were added to with these that come specifically in the New Testament. People sometimes call them the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. And, not only that, you kind of add in some of these other virtues that are part of the New Testament, things like humility and purity and kindness, gentleness, diligence, patience. All those made the rounds. You keep searching into the scriptures and you'll start finding things like honesty and trustworthiness, okay, or generosity or joyfulness or self-control and fortitude. There's just this inventory of virtues that are all through the New Testament and the broader set of scriptures. There are many different hues in the palette of virtues, okay, and even within the moral catalog of the New Testament, and each one of those colors just adds a little bit of its own beauty to the spiritual life. Maybe each of the virtues is best nurtured by one particular discipline or maybe by a particular way of practicing the disciplines, but they definitely have their own internal logic. Each of the virtues has its own type of narrative that sustains it. You think about the virtues of courage and self-discipline. Okay, those sorts of things are going to grow out of different kinds of stories. Okay. Wisdom and generosity. They may look like different kinds. They may have different kinds of narratives that kind of back those things. Okay, and I don't know. Maybe that's just the way it is. That you have all these different virtues, and they have something in common. This kind of quality of goodness to them, but they may also have these divergences in the way that we talk about them, the narratives that support them, and the sorts of disciplines that cultivate them over time. But we have this general picture about being good, and it may be that we have some set of virtues that we prize more than others, but it's that overall characterization of something approximating goodness that we generally hold in mind. Everybody wants to be known as the prototypical good person. That's what people say about somebody. Oh, he's a good person. He's a good guy. She's a good girl, right? But what does it mean? And some of that may be culturally defined, but there really may be this core of goodness, and I think it's difficult for people to understand what that is. Okay, well, here's the deal: you can't just become generically good. Goodness is really a composite of lots of other more particular virtues and traits that in their own right have to be cultivated and nurtured over time. What I want to suggest to you is that one way you can practice those virtues is by intentionally focusing on one of them at a time. And instead of just trying to be good, you try to be loving, okay? Or try to practice joyfulness or patience or self-control or fortitude or, whatever it is. That you focus on one, you pour your attention on that singular virtue, and, that could be attention in prayer or reading or study or whatever, but at any rate, you take one, and for a determined period of time, much like we talked about focusing on a tiny text, you focus on a singular virtue. And you give yourself a month or two to work on it intentionally, and you learn about it, and really a lot more importantly than learning, you practice it in some way. So you can give yourself a little time to find good quotes, find quotes about courage and plaster them all over your bathroom mirror or your car dashboard or on your desk, or make them your wallpaper for your computer or your phone or something like that, right? Think about people who in your life exemplify that particular virtue. Maybe take a chance, have a conversation with somebody about it, like what it means, like how they developed that in their life, like where they came to, what was significant for them becoming that kind of person. Go find a list of scriptures that speak to the virtue, read through them in some deliberate way over that period of time, like once a day for a month or something like that. Or you find some longer form book that somebody's written. You fill out in your mind what that virtue means. It may be that none of those things necessarily helps you by providing some kind of specific insight, like this genius idea or some kind of special technique. But nonetheless, you may be formed simply by the process of putting focused attention on that aspect of your character, on that virtue. In other words, it might not be the sticky notes on the dashboard or, the book that you read, but it might be that just you, for this period of time, you focused your attention on being more courageous. Then that develops, the habit of your being, just that little bit more. Just by having that tangible moment in your life, those tangible moments in your day where you're bringing your attention to that virtue and dwelling on it for a little bit. It might be that each day you do that you become just a small bit more deliberate in the practice of that virtue. And by pursuing it consistently over time, it begins to make a difference in who you are. I want to offer one very specific way that you might choose to focus your attention. I think all those are, good possibilities. But I want to offer the practice of journaling through the virtues. And this doesn't have to be something elaborate. In fact, a very simple approach might be more effective. Okay, maybe that this is the kind of thing where simplicity is actually better than something really complicated. So I want to suggest you try this. Okay, get out a sheet of paper, or in a notepad, or in a journal, or something like that. Okay, and at the top of the page, write in really big letters. Write the name of that virtue. Okay, so let's take self-control, right? You take self-control, and at the top you write self-control, top of the page, real big letters, okay? And then under that, write yourself a little starter sentence, something like, today I found self-control in blank, write a big blank, right? And then under that, start with today's date. Just put today, the two numbers, 2/14 or whatever the date is, 3/17, whatever the date is that you're listening to this, take that first date. And then beside that date, right, just fill in the blank of that sentence. So today I was feeling self-control in, not going to the buffet when I was hungry, or whatever it is that you found self-control in that one, or whatever virtue it is that you're going to work on, and you just put one line, one sentence. Okay, you just complete that and make one sentence for that day, and then the next day you put the date down. Okay, and at the end of the day you write just one thing that one place that you found that virtue in that day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, and keep going until you've got a page full of this stuff, just reflections. And each one of those things is just going to represent a moment in the day where you stopped to think about that virtue and take an inventory about a moment in your day when it happened, and record it. And then when you get to the end of the page, turn the page and get a fresh sheet or whatever, and write a different virtue at the top of it. So if you started off with self-control, maybe the next one you take is something like wisdom. Okay, and you write, today I found, or whatever you can write a different kind of starter sentence. Like by this time, if you've already been doing this for a couple of weeks or so, then you're going to have an idea about the kind of starter sentence that's going to be really natural and and easy for you to do. Okay, and then go through it again. Okay, and put the date, write something about that day, and keep going and fill up that page. And then when you get done with that page, start again and write a new virtue at the top of that one and work through it. And what you're doing is you're kind of making these like one sentence journal entries about the virtues. And hopefully that what happens after a while is that you're not just thinking about it at the end of the day when you're filling it out, but it begins to call your attention to it when you're having these things happening during the day. So like you think to yourself, this is exactly the kind of self-control moment or hope moment or love moment or wisdom moment or courage moment that I was looking for. And maybe when you begin to do that, you start having that kind of focused attention, not just in those one moments, but through the day, and it really begins to kind of cultivate the virtue within you. Okay? That kind of focused attention not only lets you see what's happening in your life, by recording it, but it may actually be part of a practice that encourages you to keep cultivating it. You're not just recording it makes you do it. And you keep putting one step in front of the other, doing it just a little bit more day by day. And when you're doing that, you're practicing the virtues in that way daily, then it's going to let them become woven deeply into your character. Okay, that's what I want to say for this episode. So pursue virtue. Pursue it every day. Find a way to do that. Thanks for listening. And do me a favor, and if you find the podcast helpful, share it with your friends. And remember to subscribe in the podcast app of your choice. It's iTunes or Overcast or whatever. And we'll be back soon with a new episode. Until then, keep taking the next step that you see in front of you. And may God be with you on each step of your journey. Peace.